we are, smoke-filled room, on the week of the Republican National Convention. So obviously there's a lot of politics to talk about. Certainly a lot has happened since we had our last recording last Thursday. Every time I thought I knew what this podcast would be about this week, something new happened, and then we had a brand new thing that had to make it on the agenda. So who knows how far we're going to get in today's agenda, but what I do know is that we're going to have some excellent discussion. We've got some great guests this week, and I want to get through introductions right away. So let me start here with Joe Sosnowski, State Representative for the 69th District. He's been there since 2010. He was previously on the DeKalb and Rockford City Councils. Joe, we're glad to have you back with us.
Yes, look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Dennis Cook, president of Strive Strategies Group, one of the main Republican consulting companies in the state of Illinois. Also served as president of the Young Republicans in Illinois and a number of other titles. Dennis, glad to have you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back, Collin.
We also have John Giesecke. He is a political consultant. You guys probably know him well if you've watched episodes of SFR for the last year and a half. John, we're glad to have you, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, Collin.
Michael Butler is our Southern Illinois political expert at Core Strategies. Michael, what's up, bud?
Hey, good to be here, as always.
And then Chris Jackowiak, the grumpy one, is the political expert for Core for Northern Illinois. What's up? You happy today? You angry today? What do we get?
Another day, another dollar, Collin.
We'll find out, I guess, as we get into our next couple topics. So this is probably old news because everyone on the planet is aware of what our first topic is because you've all seen it, you've all heard about it, but it's such a massive topic, we have to cover it. So let's start here. After years of the left intentionally vilifying the right, attacking Donald Trump, and setting Trump up as a threat to democracy, as an existential threat to this country, as the second coming of Adolf Hitler, as the dictator in chief, as the one who's going to end America as we know it. And every Republican gets lumped in with this effort. Shocker, shocker, some deranged individual goes out with a weapon and tries to shoot Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania. I'm so surprised that that's the culmination of a deliberate effort by the left to scare Americans. They've done it. They've succeeded. And here we are today at what is a dark day, frankly, for our country. I don't care Republican or Democrat. The fact that a would-be assassin tried to take out a former president and a nominee for president is unacceptable at every level. Let me just open it up there. We'll talk about ramifications and everything else as to what this might mean. But this being a pretty major moment in American history, I'll just stop there and open it up for anybody who might have some thoughts.
I just think it's one of those moments where, like, you'll always remember where you were and who the first person to tell you was. I was at the Cardinals and Cubs game, and we had just beaten the Cubs like 11-3 or something crazy, just totally walloped them. And we were leaving the game, and my cousin texted me and said, and he watches this show like every week, so appreciate him a lot. But he texted me and was, Trump had just got shot. And like you said, that's not the country that, we want to be, where, people have disagreements. They may not like Trump. They may not like Biden. There's plenty of, criticisms for both of those candidates and, how they've conducted themselves over their careers. But this is not how we solve problems. You make your voice heard at the ballot box. That's where you're supposed to make it heard, not by, trying to assassinate somebody. So thank God that this assassin wasn't successful. And, you feel sorry for the families of those, the firefighter that was ultimately shot and killed, and those that were injured. And you just pray for them, pray for their families, because it's a tough time for them for sure.
It was like one of those first national crises, as my twins will now remember. They're 14. That put that perspective after it happened is like, had to spend some time talking to them about, this incident, and then, about things that's happened in the past. But this will be the first thing that, think about that they're going to remember. Like, it was real surreal. It really changed the mood for the rest of the day and dinner, because it was my wife's birthday. So it was just, it was total changer, as we all know.
I mean, Dennis, I got to imagine you probably felt similar to how I felt, which was a range of emotions. But at a certain point at the end of the night, you sort of settle in on, like, I got kids, and this is really where our politics is. I remember when Peter Roskam in his last election, the dude had to wear a Kevlar vest during parades because of all the threats that he was getting. I mean, if this is where our politics is, if we've got kids, if you've got family, you start to wonder, like, is this the place I want to be? I mean, I'm not saying I settled there permanently, but you have those feelings as you hug your kids.
Well, it makes you think about wanting to run, and Representative, you're there now. You're in that role. It's the game's changed from when we all started this game, right? It's like you never even thought about it, but now it is on your mind constantly. You're like, what's going to happen? Who's the crazies out there? Who might stop by the office today? I got cameras here at the office. We've had people show up that, because they know that what work we do, right? They go look on disclosure reports and they show up. So we're just in a different time. And all of us on this call have to be, vigilant and pay attention to the things around us that are going on constantly.
Obviously, a huge concern, in a couple areas. And number one, I think, just like you said, Dennis, I think both sides, at certain points will, I think see, especially on the national stage, but statewide, we see some of that too. You basically, we treat like political figures as not real people, right? We're just going to vilify them. They're the worst, they're anti this, anti that, and going to end the country, and, all this vitriol. And, we've even seen this carry over, which has really been crazy from, the Senate president going after the Supreme Court recently, U.S. Supreme Court. And, we just need to lower the temperature. We need to talk about policies, debate issues, let's not villainize people. But as was pointed out, especially against Trump, this whole, we're going to end the country, constant monologue that Democrats and the media have pushed in a lot of ways has just built this up and made this into just some scary times. And and then with social media, I'm just still shocked by and it's random here and there. I mean, it's certainly not a lot, but the fact that somebody will go on social media after something as tragic as this was, and it could have obviously truly been tragic by just a matter of inches, but people are going on social media saying things like, oh, we wish you would have aimed better, and just horrible things. I mean, I just can't imagine the type of person that would actually put that on a public social media with their name on it and say something in that regard. And you see smatterings of it across, Facebook, Twitter, and other places. But we just got everybody sit back, as a public, no matter how caught up you are in the political system and how much you fervently support your candidate, you've got to stop the fervent hate of the other person and put it in perspective. And the third thing I just want to point out, just we'll see more, I'm sure, as the FBI investigates. But obviously, we haven't had something like this at a presidential level, obviously, since Reagan. And I think there's huge security issues and concerns. I don't want to make any judgment, but there is obviously failures as far as advanced team and planning. And with the amount of security, Secret Service, and police, there was definitely things that could have been covered. So, you hate to have a learning experience, but we need to get to the bottom of what happened. And, we just need to be smart about how we secure people at these levels, knowing that these threats are out there. And, the fact that Kennedy, for instance, granted he doesn't have a pathway to victory, but the fact that they refused him a Secret Service protocol at all, I mean, it's just, mind-boggling. We have to be smart about this and secure that so we can have free, safe debate in this country and in a political system.
Yeah, great points. Chris, John, you guys got thoughts?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from it, kind of as we've gone through the week, is like, kind of leading off what Joe said, like, this is just a giant security debacle, in my opinion. My first thought was, like, it was so quiet. I'm like, did somebody just get like a pellet gun in there? Like, there's no way that someone actually got a gun into a rally, like going through security. But no, it turns out that they actually didn't secure one of the rooftops, of the visible rooftop, with aim at the president, former president of the United States. And like, to me, it's just kind of this giant security debacle where you've seen, people were at the rally saying, we were telling police there's a guy crawling on the roof and he has a gun. And, apparently Secret Service were kind of aimed in on this guy. Like, I don't know what the rules of engagement are. But it seems like, you know, people in the crowd were aware of this. Like, the biggest thing to me is like just the security debacle that led up to this taking place. Because from all the reporting that got on, this guy should have never got a shot off to begin with.
Well, and he
absolutely.
almost, the big thing here is that he almost did take Trump out. Like, we've all seen like the video where they're showing like, you know, what the gunman's crosshairs would have looked like, and Trump literally turns his head at the last possible second, and that's the only reason why the gunman hit his ear instead of like the center of his head. Like, imagine a scenario where Trump actually died on Saturday by an assassin. Like, they wouldn't even hold an election. Like, God forbid that would have actually happened, because who knows what type of political environment we'd be like dealing with right now. Not even just political environment, the environment of this country, because we don't know what Trump supporters would have done after that. Like, that's for some people within the Trump, you know, base, like that would have been considered an act of war. So we don't know what they would have done. Thank God Trump did not die and everything's okay. And, you know, rest in peace the gentleman who did die. But it's a very good thing for this country in general that Trump did not die on Saturday, because this could have been a whole lot worse, and who knows what would have happened.
Well, listen, that's the natural end result of both parties, but especially the left, scaring people to the level that they have. I mean, the number of times I hear the word civil war from people on both sides, it scares the crap out of me. I mean, we did that poll not that long ago where we asked people, you know, how willing are you to use violence to defend our democracy? And there was a significant portion, way too many people that said, yeah, violence may be necessary. And Chris, you're right. This could have been the fire or whatever, the spark that lit that fire. And the fact that we are teetering on that edge says we are way too far and we need to chill the F out. I mean, that is just where we are right now, that if we are that close to something that could have been absolutely destructive to this country at the foundational level, then we are clearly we're so far past the line. What's the Friends quote? We're so far past the line is a dot to us at this point. I mean, it is time to take not just one, but many giant strides backwards here. And that's the lesson of this, though, as you guys will see as we'll talk about in one of our next topics, the left clearly hasn't learned their lesson, because 24 hours later, they went right back to it. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Any other final thoughts on this? We'll talk about the election implications next with our next topic. So any final thoughts just on what happened before we move to the next topic?
I saw one poll that was like done like days before this assassination attempt. I think it was by CBS News, and they were asking people, you know, do you believe that political violence is justified if it stops Trump from getting the nomination? And then they asked, you know, Biden supporters, you know, and then they asked Trump supporters, the alternate, you know, do you think violence is justified to stop Biden from, you know, serving another term? And 10% of Biden supporters said that they thought violence was justified, and 6.5%, I think, of Trump supporters. So it was slightly, you know, 3.5% less of Trump supporters, but 1% would be a problem. Like, that's not the country that we want to live in, where people think that that is a legitimate part of the political process, that violence, you know, that is justified in any sense.
Well, and Michael, we always like to talk about not being hypocritical on this show. It's a big thing for me. I mean, if you guys look, and Lane can put the link in the comments of this video after it gets uploaded tomorrow, I did a whole video on Live from the Lincoln Desk on the fact that we need to stop using violence to make our political points after a pro-life supporter rammed a car into a Planned Parenthood building in Illinois. I did a whole video saying, stop it, stop the violence. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of us, especially the 6 of us on this discussion, who have we've practiced what we preached. I mean, even when it was inconvenient, even when I had to call out somebody on the conservative side, a pro-lifer, I did it. It was the right thing to do, to say, stop it, stop the violence. So we have been intellectually consistent on this topic. So just because this happens to be violence against a Republican, that's not the reason why we're talking about this. Violence in any form is not called for.
I think another thing too is like the words we use matter. I mean, like whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, like, you know, the words that, you know, people on the left might have used led to today's events, or the words that people on the right use, you know, helped fuel what happened in January 6th. Like, the words we use matter, and they have led to, you know, events that just should not be taking place in this country. Like, you know, Joe made up a great point. Like, you know, we need to discuss and debate ideas, but we need to leave it at ideas. Like, nobody's actually going to overthrow democracy. They're not going to be the next Hitler or a dictator. Like, if you disagree with Joe Biden's policies, then talk about those policies. If you disagree with Donald Trump's policies, then talk about those policies. But, the words that politicians and the media use matter, and they influence the actions of people. Over the past 4 years, we've seen those actions become more and more violent.
Mm-hmm. Well, and John, I think you bring up January 6th. That's a good point, which is if the left wants to say that Trump is responsible for January 6th because some of the words he said in the lead up to it led to those actions, well, then the left has to take responsibility for all the words they said, which led up to the action on Saturday. I mean, you have to be consistent. If you think January 6th is Donald Trump's fault, then you got to take blame then for what happened in Pennsylvania this Saturday.
Well, in the interview that Biden did.
Hold on, Michael. Dennis is trying to jump in. Go ahead, Dennis.
Sorry, go ahead.
Again, take a step back. It's all of it. It's not just, what we're seeing on a national level. Let's bring it back home to Illinois. Let's talk about it just our own internal Republican Party. Look what we see on a constant basis, like the right against moderates, and it's a clown. I mean, it's a clown show. I know you got the segment later for, calling that out. But, I mean, we beat the heck out of each other. I mean, we're terrible at coming together at the end. But, man, I tell you, we're really good at tearing each other down, but it's taken a new step over the years. And it's gotten nastier and nastier and nastier. And that's one thing that needs to tone down too, right? All of it needs to come back a step because it's bad. And we're getting to a point where this could become a new norm. And I hate to say that. I mean, we got blogs out there in this state who like to keep poking. Well, guess what? What happens with the other people that are done taking the poke? It's just a matter of time before this tinderbox poof goes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's move to the next topic just because I want to keep us moving on the agenda. I got to introduce our next topic here.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Which could have multiple meanings at this point, but we are to our segment in our episode where I debate my political team, at least one member of the political team, and our guests decide who wins. And on this week's topic, we're talking about, is the presidential race over? Did what happened on Saturday, did that end the presidential race? And is the remainder of at least that race at this point just perfunctory and not even worth letting continue? I'm taking the position of this race is done. Not just because of what happens, because it rallies the country around Donald Trump in a way that hadn't happened before. But I'm going to give credit where credit is due. For all the things that I have said in the past about Donald Trump does have flaws and he has made mistakes. He does have failures. There's one thing that I've been consistent on is that he is a master at PR. He is a master at marketing and imagery. And that image of putting the fist up immediately after getting shot at, that is enduring. A lot of this may be forgotten, but that image by itself will not just last till November. That image is going to be in history books for a very, very, very long time. And so while I understand that a lot can happen in politics in 3.5 months, and certainly one of those things could be that Joe is removed from the ballot, from whether it be for health reasons or other reasons, certainly that could change the race. But at this point, as it stands today, if it's Trump-Biden, this race is over. This race is done. A lot of my Democrat friends, even nationwide, my colleagues around the country who do what we do, but do it on the other side of the aisle, have basically said, if Joe's not getting out, it's time to start focusing down ballot. We're not winning president. Let's at least mitigate the disaster. Can we hold the Senate? Maybe. Can we hold on some of these legislative seats? This race is over. Even Democrats are saying this race is over, especially since it doesn't look like Joe's getting out. So that's the pro position on, yes, this race is over. Chris, give the anti position.
So I will concede that you're 100% right on the PR element of this. And that image of Trump, fist in the air, blood on his face in front of the American flag, will go down in history as one of the defining moments of this entire period of American politics. However, I think we are too wrapped up in how things should be, how things used to be, and how things, typically happened in politics. If this was 10, 20 years ago, I'd say, yeah, something like this happening certainly would have closed the deal for Trump and this race would have been over. However, we live in an American political system where A, voters have shorter and shorter term memories, and B, I don't know if a near assassination is enough to make voters forget about everything else that happens in this election cycle. I think that more and more voters are becoming numb to political violence, as we've talked about, that they just view political violence as another part of the system. We saw this entire country burn to the ground in 2020 after George Floyd, and the Democrats still won the election in November. I think over time, you are going to see more and more people forget about this incident, especially if more things happen between now and election day. Joe Biden just got COVID. God forbid Joe Biden dies in the next few days. God forbid. But if that happens, that's going to take over the entire narrative of this election. And people will forget about the fact that Trump was almost killed on a Saturday in July. Because there are more things that come to the forefront of any election cycle that may make people forget this ever happened. And even if Joe doesn't die, even if they just pull him out, put Kamala in there, he drops out, whatever, that's still an entire upheaval of the political cycle that would carry the news day and carry everything within a voter's mind that may make one forget about the fact that Trump was even assassinated. And here's the final point I'll make. Even with Trump being almost assassinated, let's remember the fact that a lot of people don't like Trump. They don't. Even if we are willing to concede that a lot of people may not agree with assassinating the former president of the United States, a lot of people just simply don't like the guy. And their sympathy for him only goes so far. And especially amongst those swing voters that maybe needed the election. Do I believe Donald Trump is the front runner for November? Yes. If you were going to put money on this race, I would tell you take 4-1 odds, bet on Donald Trump, and take your 25 cents on the dollar. But at the same time, I do think that this race is not over yet. 3.5 months is an eternity in politics, and so many other things can change.
All right, Michael, give us your short thoughts. I know you're with me on this one, so one of these days we're going to get you to disagree with me, but give your short thoughts, then we'll open it up to our guests.
No, I think that, this had a galvanizing effect on the Republican base. You see that at the convention this week and how unified people have been. I'm really interested to see what Trump has to say tonight. There's a lot of signs that there's been kind of a change in demeanor, and that this really kind of changed his outlook on, how he needs to run this race going forward. So hopefully he does that and puts on a strong showing. There's only been 2 polls since the assassination attempt, but I pulled some of the numbers from Emerson, which is, one of probably the best pollsters in the country. They did the state by state, swing state one. They have Trump up 7 in Arizona, up 6 in Georgia, up 3 in Michigan, up 5 in Nevada, up 5 in Pennsylvania, up 5 in Wisconsin. So, he's had a lot of victories over the course of the past couple of weeks. The debate performance was good for him. You have the dismissal of the case in Florida. That was a victory. And then, surviving this assassination attempt really galvanized a lot of that support. And I think people are even more likely to crawl over broken glass to vote for him now than they were, a week ago. And they were already willing to do it.
That's the key, Michael. It's voter propensity. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks. Does this change anybody's mind on Trump versus Biden? Not very many people. But we knew this race was never about persuasion. No one's going to change their mind. Everyone made up their minds months ago on who they'd vote for in this race. It's about who will show up to vote. And this significantly raises propensity on the Republican side. It decreases propensity on the Democrat side. That's why I'm saying this race is over. But we've spent enough time. Let's open it up to our guests. Give your opinion if you'd like. Pick a winner if you'd like, though it's pretty clear Chris, is always the loser. But feel free to pick a winner or loser if you'd like. But we'll open it up to our 3 guests for your thoughts.
I think this race is far from over because I'm on the hot take that Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. I think there's been a lot of great reporting out of Politico that, people like Schumer, Pelosi, and Jeffries, they've been meeting with him over the past week, and they're basically telling him he needs to get out of the race. There was a quote from an article that came out today that said, everyone feels that if they push hard enough that he will eventually relent, the Senior Hill Democrat said. I don't think Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee. And I don't think it's going to be Kamala Harris because Democratic delegates are going to feel that she cannot beat Donald Trump either. Gretchen Whitmire and JB Pritzker ticket, I think would beat the Trump Vance ticket most likely. And I think Trump just gets lucky where in 2016, he ran against one of the most unlikable candidates for president of the United States in our entire history. Biden's popularity right now is super underwater. Nobody really likes him. There's concerns about his age. If he runs against anybody who voters have just an appetite to take on, I think that he's going to lose in November, this assassination attempt or not. I think this race is far from over. And if there's a new Democratic nominee for president, I don't think Trump wins.
A lot of ifs, but I certainly hear your point.
Turnout. I think that's the game. I mean, you guys kind of touched on that, and definitely huge flaws for Biden. You're talking what, a handful of states, though, maybe 20 some counties that are really going to be the deciding factor in some of those key states. And I think, as was mentioned, you got galvanized Republican turnout. There's an excitement. I think I saw a Frank Luntz kind of analysis where, just his personal analysis was, hey, if you got this type of enthusiasm, at this point, it's probably worth 1-2% in the polls. And, that's enough to win these ultra close states. And now, does Biden get out? This whole question fascinates me, because you don't become president and you don't run for president. You don't, be in politics for 50 years if you don't have a little bit of confidence. I don't think Biden in any way, shape, or form is going to step down. I think he's going to dig in, fight back. And you got to remember, he's got a sphere of people around him too that, maybe their jobs are dependent. Maybe they like working there. Maybe they support him. I mean, they've been with him for years. They don't necessarily want him to go. You may have a couple advisors who are trying to figure out the next step. But then the pathway to replace him too, as was mentioned, you got a weak vice presidential candidate, and then does a Gavin Newsom jump in there, in a short period of time? Does that really make sense in 100 days or 90 days? And I think we've got a little indication, and maybe I'm understanding it wrong, but, kind of the announcement that the Democratic Convention is going to go and take care of the formal part of it virtually before the convention, I think just kind of lends ears that there's still Biden mechanisms working behind the scenes just to make sure we can get that wrapped up for him and take that off the table. And, like was mentioned, in politics, 120 days is a long time. And the bar is so low for Biden right now. I mean, he comes out in the next debate and is, let's just say he's mediocre to, okay. I mean, people may think, oh, look, he's actually all right, and that may actually, turn up some Democratic turnout. But I think that the odds are stacked against him tremendously. I think Trump's just got so much in his favor. And I think the coalescing of the Republican Party and the key outreach that he's doing, and we've seen that at the RNC convention with some key individual areas and groups and outreach, he's really looking to galvanize and bring some new people to the Republican Party that will hopefully ice this for him.
Dennis, give us the final word here, buddy.
Status quo, Trump wins, right? If the race stays as is, this race is, I believe, over. However, I think Joe's out. I think the pressure behind the scenes gotten really, really loud in the last couple of days. I think the tone's changed from Friday. I'd be surprised if Joe's there at the end. Now, that doesn't mean that they have the path to victory. I mean, can they win in Michigan or Pennsylvania with somebody else? I don't know. But if the race stays this way, it's over. And but I will say, bigger part of it is I think Joe's out. I think Joe will be removed. I think he's out.
I think that gives me the win with an asterisk, Chris, where it's not a full win, but people are agreeing with my point, which is if the race stays the same, you're saying that if we change who the candidates are, then maybe it won't end up the same. But that's not the question here. In this race, these two opponents, that's the question here. So I think there's a technicality to be had. But either way, we've spent way too much time on this topic, so we won't give an official
one more sentence, Collin. Just one more
sentence. One more sentence.
We all work in Republican politics. We should never underestimate the Republican Party's ability to fuck something up.
Well, there's a fair point there. I'll close with this. If Biden gets out, the ticket is Harris Pritzker. I'm just going to put that on the record. I've said it several times before. I'll say it again. That's the ticket if Biden gets out. But we don't have time to go into a whole debate on that. So let's move on to the next topic because we got to talk about this. One day after coming out and saying, everybody, we need to chill out. The rhetoric is too much. This isn't good, which was accurate. One day later, on Monday, Illinois Democrats couldn't help themselves but go right back to the same rhetoric, the same incendiary rhetoric that led us to this point in the first place. After J.D. Vance was announced as Trump's VP choice, the Democratic Party came out and said he is a, quote, dangerous choice. The DNC chair said that the stakes of this election just got even higher. Pritzker came out and called him an extremist. One day after saying, guys, we need to tone down the rhetoric, the Democrats in this state couldn't help themselves but go right back to the rhetoric. So that's this next topic is, can the Democrats even help themselves, or are they going to go right back to the same crazy rhetoric that put us in this position in the first place?
I think they're already back. I think they're right back at it.
I mean, they couldn't make it a day. They couldn't make it 24 hours.
I would say as of today, they're full back. They're back to regular programming. Absolutely. They couldn't help themselves.
I mean, I guess if we all just agree, it leads to a very, very lame discussion. So I guess we're all just say, sure, yeah, it's right. But, you know, to me, the hypocrisy drives me crazy. You know, they're on us for years and years. You guys caused January 6th. You guys are an existential threat. And then here we are. Their rhetoric leads to something, and there's no repercussions. It's just right back to the same crap.
Well, Collin, okay, let me say this. We still don't actually know why this guy decided to shoot Trump. So I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves by saying the left's rhetoric caused this. It may have, very well might have. We still don't know why this idiot decided to try and shoot Trump. So let's try and wait until we figure that one out before we start throwing back.
The environment was created by the rhetoric. I think everybody agrees with that. Whether he was a Republican or a Democrat, whether he gave, what was it, $15 or $150 to some Democratic cause, who cares? It's the environment that was created. And the rhetoric here is not on Republicans, it's on Democrats and the left.
Well, I watched the interview that Joe Biden did with Lester Holt. I think it was CBS a couple of days after, and Lester gave him an opportunity to kind of disavow some of this rhetoric, and Joe Biden just pivoted from, hey, I haven't said anything inappropriate, but Donald Trump has. And it's like, you need to take, if you're the leader of this country, you need to put politics aside and say, you know, hey, we got to tone this down a little bit, because, I mean, you know that Joe Biden's not running his Twitter account. It's probably some staffer, but you can go through some of those tweets that he sent out about, you know, Donald Trump being a threat. He's an existential threat, you know, threat to democracy, all of these things. I mean, that rhetoric definitely contributes to the atmosphere that we're living in right now.
Yeah. Well, here, just to be fair, I'll tell you, there's one quote I didn't give, which is, and someone else who wants to be, I don't know, a little bit less above board, feel free to take this line and use it against Pritzker, because Pritzker in an interview said, basically, so he said the words, this was a relatively minor incident. Now, the context, which of course the left made sure to quickly fill in for him, was that medically it was a minor incident, that it only hit his ear. But I'm being fair, and I'm not lumping that quote into this list of quotes where they've made mistakes. But if you're a Republican organization, if you're a conservative organization, listen, this is what the Democrats would do to us. If a Republican said that this was a relatively minor incident, the Democrats would be all over it. It would be in mail pieces, it would be in TV ads, it would be in fundraising appeals. And Pritzker said that. So it's not something, I'm going to be fair here because I know the context. So I'm going to say, fine, Pritzker, you're okay. But he said the words that this was a relatively minor incident for Trump. If you're a conservative or Republican organization, I'd take that. I'd put that in a fundraising appeal right now because that's ridiculous.
They will definitely use it. That's why, you know, your prediction of a Harris Pritzker ticket would be, hey, it'd be wonderful, because, you know, that's exactly what you're going to see. But yeah, you know, especially with Pritzker, I mean, you know, he is all about rhetoric. He's not going to win on the issues. I mean, we've seen him in debates against Rauner and Bailey. I mean, he's terrible. You know, you go to the national scene, he's just not going to make it very far. And so he's got to stick with his, you know, his pro-abortion. You know, it's always abortion. Every issue is about abortion. And, you know, Trump is dangerous because he's not going to talk about, you know, the issues. You know, he's not going to get into a lot of detail about why, you know, open borders might be an issue, because he's not going to win that debate. You know, and on a more social issue, he's not going to win the debate on why he supports men playing in women's athletics. You know, how demoralizing, you know, to women. I mean, how is he going to get up there and you know, have a 20-minute conversation and defend that position? He's not. He's got to go after, you know, Trump and, you know, Republicans with all this rhetoric. And he's, you know, unfortunately, he's got the money to really back it up. So he'll get that messaging cycle, you know, behind him. But if he goes out on the national scene, I agree. You know, there's a lot of fodder to be used against him, and you know, I just don't think he makes it very far.
Well, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, I think, when, you know, Pritzker was ramping up his rhetoric about Trump and others and saying things that were definitely not above board. So, you know, he's a contributing factor to this as well, and we need to, you know, make sure that people are aware of that.
Yeah, he's the major contributing factor. He's the one who's gotten the most nasty against Donald Trump intentionally. So the governor of Illinois on the national stage is number one on the problem list of this rhetoric problem. One last thing I want to ask you guys about. I noticed something, and I want your opinion, your genuine opinion, and if I'm reading too much into this. If you look at every quote by a Democratic lawmaker, Democratic politician, left organization, they always use the phrase political violence. Saturday night into Sunday, when they all issued their statements, it was always political violence is unacceptable. And it was so pervasive. If you look, there were hundreds of quotes, and they all had the phrase political violence. That does not, to me, seem accidental. There had to be some memo issued as to how to respond to this, call out political violence. And to me, the fact that it was that intentional of an issue, of an effort, makes me wonder, why were they so careful to not simply use the word violence? Because to me, isn't violence unacceptable? Political violence or any other type of violence, to me, violence is unacceptable. Taking this one step further, are they saying that because they're afraid to anger the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters who are using violence to make their points, or the people who used violence to make their points during the BLM protests? Are they trying to differentiate between sometimes we can use violence during protests that's okay to their left base? Is that what this is? Because it was a clear intentional effort to say political violence is not acceptable, rather than just saying violence is not acceptable.
I think you're stretching it there, Collin. I don't think it's because the George Floyd protests and the Palestinian protests are also political violence. So, like, you can conceivably think that they're calling you out as well, because those people view themselves as political. They view themselves as victims of a political system. So I think you're stretching it a little bit here, Collin. But I do think it's interesting. I would believe that it was probably intentional, that there was a memo sent out to all the congressmen saying, hey, say this, don't say that, something along those lines. But I think you're stretching a little bit from the.
Hey, can I say one more thing? Because it's about a target district. And, Katie Stewart, I looked on her social media because she's in a competitive race to see if she had said anything about it. No comment whatsoever on Twitter, Facebook, none of her accounts. And I even commented on one of her posts and asked if she was going to make a comment about, the assassination attempt. And they deleted my comment. So, I mean, come on, Katie. That's just, I don't know if she's too busy. Maybe she's
Michael,
purchasing.
You should have saved this for the clown of the week segment, buddy. This was a race.
That'll be good. Yeah, that's true. We got plenty of clowns this week, though. So
fair. Anybody have thoughts? Am I crazy on this? I mean, it's clearly an intentional effort to say political violence. I'm just curious why. Why is there such an intentional effort to say that? Just something I'm interested in. But if nobody's got thoughts, we can keep moving. But I'll open it up in case anyone has thoughts.
I think they're trying to stay unified on it so they can continue to take the high ground. Like, I would assume their messaging pivot's going to be, when Trump attempted, and there was an attempted assassination on Trump's life, we called out political violence. We told people to stop. When January 6th was going on, Trump just sat there and tried to film a bunch of videos, and he wouldn't call on people to stand down for hours. Like, feels like they're trying to take the moral high ground with the issue. So come the fall, they can kind of rehash what happened on January 6th and say, look, we took the high ground. Republicans are still the actual threat to democracy here.
All right, fair. Let's keep moving on our agenda here. So what I thought was going to be our lead story of the week, since our last podcast was recorded last Thursday, Kathy Salvi has been chosen as the new Republican Party chairman in Illinois. She introduced herself at the RNC with the press conference and has already had a number of quotes in the media over the last week as our new chairperson. Anybody have thoughts? We've got a new chairwoman, a new chairperson as a chairman of the Republican Party in Illinois. Open it up if anybody has thoughts on Kathy Salvi.
There was one quote that I saw in one of the articles that really gave me some hope, is whenever she said, I'm a mom, I've got 6 kids. The Republican Party in Illinois is now my 7th child. And she said, I'm used to calling things out, calling bad behavior out. And she's like, I'm going to do that as chairman because there's been, we've had problems with that in the Illinois Republican Party. I know we've talked about that in previous episodes, that there's been some bad behavior by certain individuals. And if she's going to do that and call some of that bad behavior out, I think that's good for us.
It's a tough and thankless job.
That is for sure. I'll just say this: I've met Kathy a number of times, worked with her family on some projects. She is the sweetest person on the planet, the absolute nicest person on the planet, and she will be the biggest cheerleader. I mean, Don Tracy was a pretty good cheerleader. Kathy Salvi will be the best cheerleader you could ever hope for the Republican Party. The concern is, politically, does she have the savvy? Does she have that level of political chops we're going to need to turn the state around, let's say post-November? That's the question, but you got to give her at least a chance to prove maybe she does. So let's give her that chance. But certainly, at least for the next 4 months, having somebody who's going to be a huge cheerleader for the Republican Party, she's already proved it this week. She will be that. I'd be concerned that some of the statements are maybe not going to be rooted in reality about how, Republicans are going to run the table. We're going to win all these races. Well, let's stay in reality. We're hoping to win a handful of races. It's not going to be a tsunami. So maybe let's bring it back to reality a little bit. But certainly for an era of positivity and unity, she'll be a positive factor in that space. So certainly I'm happy for that.
I like Don Tracy, as was mentioned, thankless job. Don did a great job. He's a little bit more, quieter, nuts and bolts guy. Really working hard behind the scenes, raising some money in a tough environment. He did a good job, and it's a full-time volunteer position, as a quote I think he used, and it's brutal. I saw him this week and said, "Hey, Don, just thanks for your service. Sorry how things ended up there, but hey, you did a good job." I think Kathy's going to be great, though. And one thing in the Illinois Republican Party, we just need to continue to do a good job of getting strong women to run for both local races and legislative races, and get them into the system. There's, and I've seen it, from different candidates, but there's a natural hesitancy, for great female candidates to get involved. They're worried about family, their kids, they're working. They've got, and they're like looking at Springfield and saying, it's probably not for me, right? And I think having Kathy, Tony McCombie in the position that she's in, hopefully we can continue to do a better job and get more people interested. And again, even if it's at local level, let's stir that up and get some good people involved. And I think she'll help with that.
Yeah, I love the press conference where it was Terry Bryant, Tony McCombie, and Kathy Salvi. It was a great image. This is the funny moment where Tony yanked Kathy off the microphones, like, "All right, that's enough, my turn." So it was a kind of a funny moment in that press conference. But I think you're making a solid point. We certainly talked about that in previous episodes about the need for more Republican women to step up into positions of leadership. So Kathy does continue that. Let's use this as our final topic. Actually, second to last topic about the convention, because we do need to talk about Illinois. But Joe, I know you were at the convention Monday and Wednesday. I'm sure, Michael, you've been tuned in every waking moment. Dennis's background is a background of the convention. So let's just have a broad discussion on the Republican Party. Where are we right now? With it seems like there's a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum on display there at the RNC. How does that affect Illinois? Joe, I want to start with you on this one.
Just real quick, I think the idea of unity, and I think the idea of Trump's just simple slogan of making America great, strong, et cetera. I think this coalescing of rivals has been good. We saw speeches from DeSantis and Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, as well as a smattering others. There was a lady who I didn't even know who she was. My wife recognized her, but Amber Rose, coming out and being this, kind of, obviously more in tune with younger folks, but her coming out as a young African-American lady, and she had maybe one of the top 10 speeches, I think, so far of the convention, and just talking about how the media has just badmouthed Donald Trump and the family. And it's really, again, back to one of my opening comments, we try to pretend these aren't real people. As his granddaughter also gave a great speech last night, talking about grandpa, really humanizing not just Trump, but his family, and just saying, the media makes this out, this crazy caricature of him, but that may only be about 10% of who he really is. And why don't we talk about some of the other things? And so I think what we've seen overall is great unity building. And again, I touched on it earlier, is they're really doing a good job, I think, reaching out into a couple key demographic areas. We'll see how J.D. Vance plays out, kind of circling the Midwest bandwagon with some of those key states. I think he's maybe not the most energetic speech that he gave, but I think he comes across as a very solid, down to earth, obviously a younger candidate. So I think we're seeing a lot of good unity building and tent building advances coming out of the RNC this week.
Yeah, I mean, the unity's great. I think the only concern I have, and this is not to push back on your point, just the concern I have is it's easy to be unified when the only people at the convention are the people from that, let's say, wing of the party. The people who stayed home, that's the problem, is the gap between those two groups. So what are we doing to unify those two groups? I think you're seeing a lot of unity on display, which is awesome at the convention, but how's that being brought back home is my big question. And that's what I'd love to see in the coming weeks. But certainly if we're going to win, we got to be unified. So I'm hopeful that it happens.
Well, and I think another thing that was kind of a major event is having the Teamsters president there as a speaker.
And Michael, you always do this, man. That's our next agenda topic, dude. Just hold for the next
that's
agenda.
my topic, all right? You know,
Good God, Butler. You have the agenda in front of you, man.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that was a good moment.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next. That's our last topic on the convention.
We had a nice event up in Milwaukee on Tuesday with the New Black Mavericks PAC organization with Richard Irvin, Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, Wesley Hunt. It was a great event. We had about 400 people show up. We had good press coverage. I think it was nice to see us open the tent and have an event. I've been to 3 conventions now, and I hadn't seen a minority event like that well attended in all these conventions I've been to. So I think you're starting to see it finally spider out and people coming in. So I think there's a real movement there. I think I hope they can build upon this and keep this going. I do have high hopes for that, and I'm excited to see how the rest of this 100 and some odd days plays out, to see about getting those numbers, the minority numbers, up. And look, so I guess that's more of a post-election analysis, geek talk, as we've talked about before, to see how those numbers look. But I'm optimistic on that. I'm optimistic.
Well, the event was huge. You guys did a great job with that, Dennis. And I love to see the MavPack name continuing on. So that was pretty cool.
That's right.
Anyone else on convention? I know a lot of you want to talk unions, and that's our next topic. So anyone else on convention, the passion coming out of that, the unity? I do think there's clearly a message change here about unity. There's a tone change here. Here's my takeaway. I think they're being nice. I think Trump was nice to Biden in that debate, and I think they're being nice to Biden at the convention. Even J.D. Vance not giving a flamethrower speech, which is what we all expected him to do. I think they're trying to be really nice to Biden because they don't want him to get out. They desperately want Biden to be their opponent. And so I think maybe the change is more about that than anything else, which is be nice to Joe. Don't attack him too much because we don't want him getting out of the race. But that's just my opinion. But there's definitely, to Michael's point, a huge tone change here. I mean, J.D. Vance, part of the reason why he's on this ticket is he's a flamethrower and he's really damn good at it. The fact that he gave such a tame speech yesterday night, we're recording this on Thursday, clearly that's notable, and it was not on accident.
I think, Collin, the other thing, too, that I took away from JD's speech is they buried the lead with him so bad. Like, JD Vance has an incredible story about, growing up in Middletown, Ohio, basically growing up in poverty, going to Yale Law School, and like having the success. He is the American dream when you kind of think about it. And they buried that story, and it did not come across very well. Like, part of the reason Vance is on the ticket too, most likely, is to appeal to voters in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I'm like, that story has to get out there because that's going to appeal to them. And they just buried that story in that speech. It did not come across well. Like, they need to refine how he's going to present that story to voters over the, next 3.5 months. Because that's his selling point, is to those Rust Belt voters, I'm one of you. And that just did not come across.
Yeah, it was not a well-written speech, that's for sure. It was given fine. Vance did a okay job giving it, but the writing of that speech left something to be desired. And it was clearly intentionally boring, but it didn't have to be so boring that you didn't tell that story, John, as you said, because this story is super compelling. And I feel like even a moderately skilled speechwriter could have presented that in a better way. All right, let's go to our last topic about the convention, because I know a lot of you want to talk about it. Monday night, there was a speech that got a lot of buzz in many different circles, some good, some bad. But clearly, this Republican effort to court unions is going prime time. A lot of us love to see it. There's some people who don't love to see it. Chris, you've been off our podcast on our last few union topics, so you haven't really been able to cover union topics. I'm going to let you kick us off here, buddy, on this topic specifically.
Are you sure you don't want John to go first? He's the one in charge of that.
I don't know. Fine. If you want to let John go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great speech. I thought it was awesome to see the Teamsters president there. He offered to speak at both conventions. It kind of shows that members of the trade specifically, they're with Republicans on a lot of issues, whether it's, guns, abortion, some of these more social issues. And they're just kind of looking for a party that can support, having a good wage and, fair day's pay for a fair day's work. I thought his speech came across really well. Some of the commentary afterwards was a lot of people in the room were kind of shocked of how much they agreed with him. But then I thought the follow-up to the speech was really good too. I think, Senator Hawley wrote a really good piece where they talked about just some of these basic policy positions that, the Republicans can kind of go into Washington and fight for. We talked about capping credit card interest rates, taking the fight to big pharma, ending exploited labor forces. These are just basic things that we can do to, support the middle class. I mean, you don't have to be all gung-ho rah-rah for, the teachers unions and some of these more left-leaning unions, but these trades unions are, they're looking for a home. The left is kind of starting to abandon them with their policies, especially this Green New Deal stuff. That's going to be killing union jobs, especially here in Illinois and across the Midwest. And the Republicans have a golden opportunity, to bring these voters into their camp. And all you just got to say is, we're going to defend your jobs. We're going to make sure you're getting a fair wage. And that's it. That's what they're looking for. And they're with us on the rest of the issues.
This is an accumulation of 8 years of moving blue-collar workers from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. This is a major victory in the polar shifts of the political shifts of this country. There are several people, special interests, who do not like this, who were very upset about, Sean O'Brien speaking at the convention, which I think, Collin, are we going to do this separately, or do you want me just to go into this reign?
Go for it, man.
So there's a couple rhinos I want to call out here. And I'm calling them rhinos because these are two individuals who stand in opposition to the leadership goals of Donald Trump and his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance. And that is State Representative Blaine Wilhauer and former State Senator Darren Bailey. These rhinos do not want to advance Donald Trump's policies of advocating for working class Americans and beginning to work with those in organized labor to advance the policy positions of the Republican Party and make this country great again. Now, Blaine Wilhauer specifically decided that he wanted to call out labor unions for giving too many jobs to the city of Chicago and not giving so many jobs to people downstate. Well, here's the problem, Mr. Wilhauer, or Representative Wilhauer. You and your buddy Darren Bailey don't decide to do anything down in Springfield. You don't advocate for any of your constituents. You don't get them jobs. Darren Bailey went down to Springfield. He said on Facebook all day, you're not advocating for capital development in your district. You're not advocating for trade. You know what you're doing? You're sitting on Facebook writing screeds about how we can't afford to go and work with the unions anymore because that'll just sacrifice our principles. Well, you're no better than the people in the Republican Party 16 years ago, or the Rounders of the world, who made it their number one goal to bust the unions in this state. I bet Blaine Wilhauer, when he first ran for state representative back in 2018, I bet he backed Bruce Rauner over Jeannie Ives because he's so viscerally hates these unions and he wants to see them go away. I guarantee you both these people didn't even support Donald Trump the first time around. I bet they voted for Ted Cruz because Donald Trump, he wasn't conservative enough for these people. And this is the problem with the Republican Party. This is the problem with these idiots who took over the Make America Great Again brand. They don't care about working families. They care about themselves. They're no better than the Republican Party was 20 years ago when it was pillaging working class Americans and only cared about Wall Street, the big banks, and rich people. Those are the people they advocate for. They don't advocate for the people in their district. So they can all go to hell, and I hope they get primaried by somebody, but they won't because that never ever works in this country. Thank you.
Listen, Donald Trump has done a good thing for our party in making us the party of the working class. We are the party of working families, which was a change that absolutely needed to happen. We're no longer the country club, North Shore Republican Party anymore. And that's a good thing because our policies are great for the families, the working families, the middle class, the lower income people of this state. And that's our base. That is our party now. And so anybody who looks at what happened Monday night and calls it out negatively on Facebook, Chris, I'm sorry, but I have to agree with you. And it's weird agreeing with you. And maybe we'll get ourselves in trouble together here. But at the end of the day, if we're not the party that could bring people like the Teamsters our way, that could bring Local 150 and these trade unions, if we can't bring those people to our side, then we're clearly not doing something right. The fact that this speech happened at the RNC, at the convention on Monday night, is a huge thing for our party, and we need to continue this shift. And if you can't get on board, then get the hell out of the way, because we are the party of the working class. And that means, yes, those right of center, those trade unions, where the membership, maybe not some of the leadership of some of these groups, but the membership of a lot of these unions are absolutely pro-Trump, pro-Republican. To call that out as a negative thing, I don't understand where the heck that comes from.
Well, the other thing, Collin, is too, how many members of the General Assembly have paid a political consequence for voting to raise the gas tax? The answer is 0. David Welter lost his primary not because of the gas tax, but because of a million different other things. Terry Bryan, Dave Severn voted for the gas tax. They smoked their primary opponents. Representative Sosnowski, have you got a primary over your gas tax vote? No, nobody has paid a political consequence for that vote. Why? Because voters like good roads. They like investment in their communities. They like having good infrastructure. Like, nobody has paid a political price for this vote because it's a good thing to bring this stuff into your district.
They're just numb to the taxes at this point. Come on.
See in Illinois here.
Yeah.
I take maybe just a nuanced approach on it, and there was another gentleman, I can't remember his name, but spoke from the pipe fitters. I actually thought his speech was a little bit better than Sean from the Teamsters. And not to discount the need to outreach and, again, build the tent, because I think everything that's been said is right. It's always been an issue of the party or the union bosses, right? I've gone to retired teachers' luncheons, and I've talked about how we need to reform the pension system. And I don't get a lot of pushback from the rank and file members when we talk about, say, hey, instead of 3%, let's do 2.5% or 2% on your COLAs. Let's all share in fixing the pension. So, really, when you get into the grassroots, the Republican Party has always been about the working families and the working class. We just didn't do a really good job of marketing that. When I go around my district, for the last 14 years, and previously when I was alderman, you were meeting farmers, the guys who are working in ditches, carpenters, et cetera. Everybody's right here. They definitely are much more in tune with the values of the Republican Party. The only thing I'll say about the Teamsters, the first half of his speech I thought was really good, very good about building up Trump and, Republican Party and wanting to, put a hand out, let's work together. He mentioned, a handful of congressmen that they've had good working relationship that are Republican, but then it did take a little bit of bend, and then he just started bashing on, places like Amazon. I'm like, I'm not going to defend Bezos, and anything like that, but, everybody in America loves Amazon, right? We're all, spending gobs of money on Amazon, and
not me.
to pick out
Bezos a dime.
Oh, no, nobody. All right. Well, you're the exception, but they're doing pretty good, and Amazon trucks are everywhere, right? And so, when you're picking on just, a handful of companies here and there, I don't know that that's necessarily was beneficial to his speech, which, again, the first half I think was great. He was really talking about, working families, his interest in securing jobs. He had a great story about his partnership and how they worked with UPS, even though I'm sure there's been, contentious debate and discussion around the scenes, but he talked about how UPS has been a growing, phenomenal distribution company, and his 350,000 Teamsters, who are part of UPS, that, they've worked together with membership or management and with their membership to be successful. So, again, not to discount, the approach that Trump and the Republican Party, I think, is taking. We need to do that. We need to find areas of common ground. As Jonathan mentioned, both as a council member in Rockford, I was supportive of even a local sales tax because we needed infrastructure improvements in the Rockford region. When that vote came up in the state, to, again, invest more money in infrastructure, it was an easy one. We need to build up, those basic goals of government. Where the union leadership needs to come to our side a little bit, though, is we need to start fighting against all the crazy spending, in all these areas, where it's not basic core mission of government. We're getting into all these different areas of funneling lots of money, whether it's to non-resident services, things like that. That's where I think, again, we can bridge some gaps there, and we got to get them together, in our line of thinking also. And hey, let's work together to just make Illinois government and local government operate well and efficiently. And yeah, we'll work together. We'll get projects. There's going to be good stuff that's going to be for everybody. But let's stop spending money in wasteful areas that aren't giving a return on the investment.
Well, we're especially seeing alignment on even especially with union households on not spending so much money on non-citizens when we do still have crumbling bridges and crumbling roads. We still have a lot of challenges in this state, and we're spending money on non-citizens. So there's definitely alignment on that.
Well, I think another point too is like kind of going off for what Chris was talking about with Blaine Wilhauer. Like, he threw out there like the politicians they have funded. Okay, so the Republican Party kind of has a fundraising problem, and we're not always the best at raising money. Why are we going to turn down people who want to invest in helping reelect and elect more Republicans into office? Like we gladly took Ken Griffin's money. I mean, why can't we take trades money and money from other sources? Like, money is a fundamental part of winning elections. You cannot just have a bunch of volunteers and go knock on 1 million doors and win a state house race anymore. You want to win races in the suburbs, it's going to cost you upwards of $1 million. So if these groups want to invest in our candidates, that want to invest in our message, let's bring everyone in. Building a bigger tent means building a bigger tent of voters and donors. So we'll gladly start taking people who want to invest in our campaigns monetarily.
Yeah, well, that's the concept of the big tent, right? It's not a big tent to fit even more people like you in the tent. It's a big tent to fit people in who may disagree with you on a few things, but there's sort of a disconnect on what big tent means, I think, with some people. Chris, close us out on this topic so we can get moving on other things.
Wilhauer and Bailey and all the other rhinos who oppose, working with unions, they need to understand one thing. They can be as conservative as they want. They can believe in whatever they want. But if they're willing to work with unions and help working families, they'll help you. That's all what it comes down to. It has nothing to do with they think you're too conservative, or they don't like guns, or they love abortion. It has nothing to do with those issues that these people so care about. It has to do with fighting for the working people in your district, both union and non. That's what it comes down to. These people refuse to do that because all they care about is themselves and their egos and their own special interests. So
let's be real. Look at the 5 people we have on this podcast. You've got Chris and Dennis being in the South suburban area. We only win in that area if we've got union households with us. You don't win if you don't have union households in that region. You've got John and Joe. You guys are out towards Rockford. Again, same deal. You don't win if you don't win union households. And then down in Michael's region, one of the biggest employers is the Department of Corrections. We don't win without that union on our side. It is a fundamental thing as part of this state. And you can separate SEIU and the Chicago Teachers Union with all of these other unions that are actually useful and beneficial to communities and to our party. So, all right, let's move on. Let's stop. That's enough on RNC and RNC related topics. Another big thing that's happened in the last week is the deadline has passed for candidates to file and organizations to file their Q2 fundraising reports. So all of us who are political geeks have been pouring through these financial disclosures and looking at them from every direction. I'll just open this up as sort of a free-for-all topic. Anybody see anything that stood out to you? The biggest thing that stood out to me overall is that it's kind of a treading water kind of situation. I don't see a lot of huge movement in fundraising. Q2 is a little bit tougher to raise money in, but it's the second to last full fundraising quarter before the November election. So it's kind of a pretty important one. If you can't put numbers up, if you can't raise money in Q2, that probably means some of these organizations, these larger organizations, aren't going to donate to you in Q3. So I think the fact that we didn't see a ton of movement, I'm not super happy with that. You saw a few Republicans up their fundraising game, but overall, it seems like we kind of mostly treaded water, and I don't love that because we've got a huge fundraising disparity with the Democrats. But curious if anybody else has any takeaways.
Well, it comes down to the last conversation, getting the unions involved, right? Look at Repoletti's race, where you have IFT and the IEA. They want to they're probably going to back him, get behind him. Are we going to not take their money? Right? I mean, those are some max outs, right? Those are some big transfers. So that's one of those scenarios, right? Where else should I get it? Where else can we have people get involved like that? You're right. We are treading water and big waves falling over these guys, right? They're just, I don't see it changing. It's tough. It is tough. I mean, how many fundraisers do we have left really in the party overall? There's a handful to do it, right? And there's others. I mean, we're not good at raising money. And we can't have Ken Griffin come in and just wave the wand and drop money. That those days are over. Those days of those types of guys right now involved, their involvement in these types of operations. Why would you give? Why would you get behind what you see right now? So we have a big uphill climb.
Especially, to carry up the piggyback off of Dennis's point there. One thing I talked about after the March primary was that a lot of Republican donors who live in Chicago or around the Chicagoland area, they started donating to the Democratic Party's candidates. They started donating to moderate Democrats in Democratic primaries with the goal of getting those people elected because they did not believe it was possible to get Republicans elected in the state. They got a return on their investment, at least in Cook County, when they got Burke elected state's attorney. Until something changes within ILGOP, those big money donors who are willing to write hundreds of thousands of dollars to conservative Democrats aren't going to come back to the party. So the Republican Party needs to start changing that image, because right now, unless you're in leadership in either of the caucuses or your name is Brad Stevens, you're incapable of raising the money that it takes to actually win elections in the state. So things got to change from an organizational perspective before the Republican Party can start bringing in the cash necessary.
I found it interesting too that some of these more swing candidates didn't raise a little bit more money in Q2, especially with the change in that ethics laws. You can't hold fundraisers on session days. So I kind of would have thought, Q2, especially, we would have seen a little bit more fundraisers, especially in the month of June. People get out of session. Let's do legislative update fundraisers. I was kind of surprised by the lack of movement on that. And, in some of these races, I know Joe and Representative John Cabello did a joint fundraiser, but those two have safe seats. Like, it's good that they're trying to raise money, but it's kind of surprising that some of these more vulnerable members didn't have more fundraisers in June. I know Brandon Schweitzer had one. That's great. He's going to have a tough race coming up this fall. I know Martin McLaughlin had one. That's good. But, we need more people to kind of get on that train of, hey, let's host events. We need to get raising money. Because if you're one of those 7 seats that Joe Biden won in 2020, you're probably going to get $1 million spent against you, and you need to be ready.
Yeah, well, they're relying on McCombie and Curran to save your butts. They've only got so much money. I mean, they've been doing a good job raising money. McCombie's got 2.2, Curran 1.9. For Republicans, if you look in our history, that's pretty good. So kudos to them. But that doesn't go very far. As John said, some of these suburban races, the Katie Stewart race, some of these races are going to be $500,000 to $1 million. That means if you've got $2 million in the bank, that's 4 races you can come play in. Harmon's got over 14. Welsh has got almost 9. So we've got a situation where the gap is so big. We need our individual candidates to step up and raise. Don't just expect McCombie and Spain on the Republican side and Curran on the Senate side, or they're going to come save your butts, because there just is only so much money to go around from them.
Well,
Dennis, I cut you off, but hold on, Michael. I cut Dennis off. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, I mean, you said it. I mean, it's these races, like you said, they're $500,000 to $1 million races. There's only so much to go around. So, I mean, you can't survive off of $10,000 to $30,000 fundraisers. It's just not going to happen. You got to get cute with the mail, got to get cute with digital, but at the end of the day, you're not going to win a race that way. I mean, it's just not going to survive. But I mean, again, I keep going back to obviously Rebeletti. That race there by itself, there's $500,000 to $1 million, easy, and hopefully this, you hope that the money that could be raised there through the teachers, if they, with their endorsements, maybe that could be the difference. They could be the difference.
Yeah, 45 is one of our best pickup opportunities. So I love that you keep bringing it up. Michael, go ahead.
Well, I just thought it was good to see that Jake Keevan, he raised around $25,000 in that quarter. New candidate, has never done this before, never run for office. Katie Stewart, on the other hand, raised $6,000. So Jay's taking it very seriously and doing what he needs to do. Whereas, I'm sure Katie's just waiting for, Welch or somebody to write her a check to pay for everything. But it shows some of that momentum that's on Keevan's side, even, despite some of the challenges he's had with laws getting changed and challenges and et cetera. So that's good to see.
Well, I mean, those two are on my list. Jake Keevan and Kevin Schmidt are on my list for good job. You're getting better each time. Problem is, Katie Stewart has $500,000 in the bank. Yeah. Latoya Greenwood has $111K in the bank, and more is coming. So kudos to Keevan for starting off decently strong. Kevin Schmidt, every quarter gets a little bit better, it seems. But we need a big jump. We need a big improvement, because the gap there is pretty big. Couple other races. Let me call out a few specifics and just get your quick thoughts if you have any thoughts on these races. Three races that impressed me and 3 races that didn't. I'll start with the negative. Amy Grant barely raised anything in House District 47. There's a lot of people nervous about that race. Jackie Williamson, the Democrat, also didn't raise much, but there just are a lot of people worried about 47. I don't know if we're going to have money to come in and save Amy Grant in that district if we've got to spend it elsewhere. Really need Amy to pick it up, and it didn't happen this quarter. Brendan Schweitzer was brought up. I only raised 15K as an incumbent. I don't love that, especially because Jarrett Clem has 125K on hand. He is burning through his cash pretty fast, which is an interesting thing to note, but not great there in 104. And I got to, just because you're on, I know you've changed your tune, but I know you were a big fan of Crystal Soltow running, but considering she just filed her committee, which means she didn't raise enough to even have to file a committee in Q2. Not great, since Stottleman has 338K in the bank. So she makes my list of the three that I'm not super happy about. On the good side, on the positive side, kudos to Jennifer Sanalitro. She is raising really, really well. Her opponent is not. For those who say that Sanalitro's race is in play, they are crazy. 48 is not in play. Sanalitro is going to win that. She's going to win it big. Liz Bishop outraised Amy Murray Briel in 76. So that's a really good thing to see. But question is, what does Yednock do with his quarter mil? That's still to be determined. But Liz Bishop did better than her opponent. And Nicole Laha, I mean, she had a great fundraising quarter. She got 59K in the bank. But her Democratic opponent, I don't know where the heck this came from, but she reached 100K in her fundraising, which is kind of surprising. But Laha's, she's doing really good, and I want to call that out. She did really good as well. So Sanalitro, Bishop, Laha, kudos to you guys. You did a great job in this quarter, and it deserves recognition.
I can answer the question of where Laha's opponents got all the money from. They're all Abul Nasser Rashid's donors.
Yeah.
Rashid's an impeccable fundraiser. Got to give the man credit. And they're tied into the same Arab American community, and all those donors are going from Rashid to Akris in this general election.
Good to know. Only other thing I'd say is on the federal level, there's a couple races we're talking about. Joe McCraw, almost $500,000 cash on hand. That's pretty good. I mean, Sorensen has 5 times that. I get it, but kudos to McGraw. That's a good number if you want to make IL 17. At least make national people pay attention to it. So kudos to the McGraw team. And Jerry Evans continues to be the little engine that could raising money. Obviously, Foster has a ton in the bank. But you've got Evans, who raised a good amount of money, and they released a poll this week that showed Biden absolutely tanking in that district, and maybe in other districts as well. So kudos to Jerry Evans as well. So that's my thoughts. If anyone has any follow-ups on those races.
Well, real quick with the McGraw Sorensen, you know, there's a reason Sorensen was calling for Biden to step down. I think that could be a district that might end up being a surprise. It can be swingy. You know, McGraw's hitting his benchmarks. I think you're going to have a lot of federal interest. It's the only congressional seat I think that's really got a solid chance. You know, even though you mentioned the Evans one, but I think that's the one where you're going to have the focus. And he's doing what he needs to, and he's making the rounds in the district. So, and I don't. You know, most people don't see Sorensen as a super strong candidate. Obviously, he's got the incumbency and the money there. But and I think you'll see some difference coming up here Q3 with some of the Republican races. You know, people are just kind of hanging on to money right now. As was mentioned, you know, the Democrats obviously have more than enough to fund their high risk races and the ones that they're going to focus on. It's just a matter of how much they're going to spend, and they got plenty coming. So. What really, you know, we got to raise what we can, and we need to have our candidates just working their butts off. You know, you got to be pounding the doors. You know, you got to make up that differential on the ground, and you know, again, keep raising what you can. But if they're not knocking on thousands of doors and you know, getting an extra bump, you know, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever that ends up meaning in some of those districts, that's going to be the deciding factor.
Yeah. All right, we're steaming towards the end. Just a couple more topics. Joe, I want to go right back to you. As we put together our agenda, all of our guests suggest topics that they'd like to have included, and you suggested one that has me really intrigued. I'm going to just shut up and let you take this one and run with it. You brought up the Pritzker state agencies and how they're plagued by dysfunction. I'd love to hear what you have to report and bring to light on this.
I think we've seen this across the spectrum, but yeah, you've got contempt cases here. You know, you've got just the unwillingness to, you know, operate well and efficiently. You know, we can go back to COVID to look at, you know, IDS and the issues and deficiencies there. I don't even know if now we have all of our unemployment offices open. There's still issues there. And then you look at professional licensing and, the constant problems that we've got and just the unwillingness to really fix it. It's great. I think all legislative offices recently got a little note saying, hey, we'll come out to your district and help people work through their professional licensing, application questions and things like that. But basically the approach the department is taking is if you have a license that's expiring in October, you better apply right now to get it started. I mean, it's just, outrageous in today's day.
These are workers. This is a problem that is hurting lower to middle income workers in the state.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that, these are people looking to work in Illinois and some are higher paid. We're definitely talking about chiropractors and dentists and doctors, coming, but these are, higher paid individuals recruited from out of state in a lot of cases. And then you've got, everywhere from, we've fought with the department. We had a beautician who was waiting 5 months, to get her license, and it's just outrageous. So the solution is get some sort of probationary license in place where, if they've got the documentation that they've taken the coursework, they've got a stamp, hey, we're going to let them get working, maybe require their employer to have, a slightly additional insurance premium just to cover, and while the application is being reviewed, let's get them going. If we can't get these licenses turned around in 30 days, there's got to be another approach. So, just again, like you said, another example of just what can we do for, just people looking to work in Illinois. These are, again, middle-class folks who just want jobs and across all state agencies, we see this. I think we're seeing some glimmers of hope. It's not because of the governor, but, in the Secretary of State's office, we are seeing some technological advances, which is great to see. We've made some movement, not in the age gap, requiring folks of a certain age to come in more often to review their licenses. Whereas in Florida, it's 6 years, for everybody, no matter what your age. And we have age discrimination that's allowed to exist in Illinois Secretary of State. Once you reach a certain age, we're going to treat you differently than everybody else. So yeah, a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're just not seeing much of it happening. And frankly, I think JB's interests and focus is elsewhere. He's not interested in managing. He's off.
If you're not going to be governor, then let Juliana Stratton take over and step down, because at this point, you mentioned the latest controversies. We've talked about DCFS a lot. There's serious challenges there. Obviously, problems with the Prisoner Review Board and the Department of Corrections is a disaster that's happening that frankly hasn't hit the news enough yet, but you're going to hear a lot more about that in the coming months. You're looking at a lot of the agencies under Pritzker are withering on the vine, and he's still blaming Bronner for that 6 years later. But Pritzker has been governor for 6 years, and not only has it made these agencies better, in many cases they've gotten worse under his quote unquote leadership. And so there's some serious challenges at these agencies, and he gets a free pass by the media, but I don't know how long that's going to last. And certainly we got to keep calling him out for it. All right, let's go to our last topic. Chris, you're here, and we got to talk about the city of Chicago. This just drove me crazy as I read this, that as we get closer and closer to the DNC, the city of Chicago is trying to cover up their problems and hide their problems. Anybody here who watches The Office, there's that episode where they bring in fake Stanley, and they move the trees around to try to make the office look better for a potential buyer. That's just what makes or what I've been thinking about as I've been reading these stories about how they're closing and moving migrant shelters, they're moving homeless people, and in one case, in order to move people from migrant tents into a hotel, they had to kick a bunch of homeless people back out onto the streets. And so this huge effort here to make the city look better for the DNC is actually putting homeless people back on the streets, proving that the policies just don't matter. It's about looking good on the national stage for the DNC. Chris, I know you've got a lot more on this than I do, but this just drives me crazy, because if we can make things look better for a month for the DNC, can't we just actually address the stinking problems? But curious your take on all this, Chris.
Collin, it's interesting because I realized when I had heard about the story that I haven't talked about Brandon Johnson in a while. He's been kind of out of the news. Like we talked about how we blamed Nixon for all Chicago's problems over 4th of July weekend, but I was pretty tame in terms of everything else. That was just him being stupid. But no, we haven't really talked about Brandon Johnson much because Joe Biden's been in the news for being the incompetent Democrat in the room right now. So it's good that we can get back to Brandon Johnson, who really is the big problem in the state. But no, you're 100% right. The city of Chicago does this stuff all the time, and it's not even just a Brandon Johnson problem. It's just a problem with the bureaucracy of the city of Chicago, where they have the ability to fix a lot of the problems they have, and they just simply don't. And they're making the problem worse, in fact, with the way they're going about this. They're trying to get the tent cities out of the, out of the bridges and everything, because they don't want the delegates and the people coming around out of the city, out of state, coming in and seeing all these tent encampments. The issue is, to bring those people into the shelters, they have to kick the other homeless people and migrants out of the shelters. So they're just swapping one problem with another here. So not really helping fixing the problem here either. Now the migrants are going to be back on the streets. We haven't really talked about the migrant crisis much recently after the Archdiocese brought a lot of them in. But, it's going to be interesting. We'll see how many migrants start shaking down delegates to the DNC outside of the United Center for money. We'll see what happens. But it's just another example of incompetence in the city of Chicago's government. It gets more dull and dull every time. But, it's hypocrisy at its finest.
Well, listen, I'm looking at a Sun-Times article right now, and this is killer. I mean, this is the Sun-Times. Like, if any paper is going to be backing Brandon Johnson, it's clearly the far left Sun-Times, and yet they're calling this out. I mean, they had a bunch of people who talked to them because up to 30 or so people were kicked out of a hotel on the Magnificent Mile as they were cleared out so that they could put other people in there. A domestic violence survivor, recovering alcoholic, people with chronic medical conditions were kicked out, and they were kicked out so fast that they weren't even allowed to gather their medicine or their belongings. I mean, this is the heartlessness that is being shown right now by Brandon Johnson and his administration in order to cover up the problems of the city so that the Democratic Party and the city of Chicago can look better during the DNC. It is just absolutely cold and heartless. And from the party that likes to lecture us and actually caring about people, the fact that they would pull this bull crap, it absolutely deserves to be called out.
Yeah, the last two times Chicago hosted the DNC, we had Daley's in charge. And obviously, the 68 convention didn't go as planned, guys. I understand that. But when the Daleys are in charge of Chicago, it was a whole year-long process to make the city of Chicago as beautiful as possible for the rest of the country to see. Because the Daleys, their big thing was opening Chicago up to the rest of the world. They wanted to make Chicago an international city. But here you see the Brandon Johnson administration is just scotch taping this issue. It's like, wow, we got to get rid of the tent cities because we don't want people seeing that. Everyone in the shelters. Oh, we don't have room. Everyone out of the shelters. Like, it's just incompetence. So, the old man Daley spinning in his grave and Daley the Dumber sitting in the retirement home spinning in his chair right now at the incompetence of the current administration in the city of Chicago.
I just think it's another example of we've talked about it before, where the Democrats, especially in this state, like to govern by press release. It's like a short-term fix that makes you look good in the moment. And, we don't really need to have a long-term solution to this. And, they realize, okay, you're going to have reporters from, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, from Washington, D.C. They're coming into Illinois to cover this convention. We got to make sure everything looks good for those video cameras. But whenever they leave town, we're going to be right back in the same situation that we were in before. And that shows that they care more about how the elites, the fake news media, what they think of our state and the job that they're doing, than they care about the people that actually live here.
There. All right. Our final segment, as always, is any nominations for OG and Clown of the Week. Obviously, having some fun here. But if anybody has any people they want to throw out here for, OG, original gangster, if you're not up on the millennial or the Gen Z terms. And of course, Clown of the Week requires no explanation. Anybody have anybody they want to throw out? Michael, you kind of already made a nomination earlier.
Well, I was going to say for OG of the week, I've got to give it to Richard Porter for confronting Matt Gaetz at the RNC and, kind of addressing some of his childish behavior that happened there. That was great. And I know Richard, I saw some articles from national, news sites that picked up on that and covered that. So that was cool. And then Clown of the Week, I got to give it to Katie Stewart for having no comment whatsoever on an assassination attempt.
Some two solid Porter. That was impressive. I love the Gaetz's. I don't even know who you are. Like, it was pretty funny, but I mean, the thing is, if you're Gates, if you act like you're just another convention attendee, which is what he did, then other just convention attendees are going to treat you that way. Like, he wasn't in that moment acting like a member of Congress, so you're not going to be treated like a member of Congress. You're going to sit there and heckle McCarthy while he's giving an interview. Grow up, man. So I'm with you on that one. What else? What else we got?
OG of the week, I agree with Butler, Richard Porter. Clown of the week's got to be Blaine Wilhauer and or Darren Bailey for their stupidity. I'll give it to Wilhauer because Bailey, all he did was comment on it like, yeah, this was a good idea. Blaine, you're a good guy. Like, screw that. Screw you, Darren Bailey. But at least all he did was comment. Blaine Wilhauer, you're the clown of the week and you're a rhino, and I don't want to see you ever.
You're just desperately trying to get poor Joe in trouble since he serves in the caucus with Blaine. But Joe's been good. He hasn't gotten himself in trouble yet on this.
I'm sure Wilhauer doesn't even show up to meetings or anything, so Joe doesn't even have to say anything. Cool.
Anyone else have anyone else you want to call out to give kudos to, or to say that, I mean, Brandon Johnson, the city of Chicago, certainly deserves to be on this list. Anybody else have any additions, though? I think Brandon Johnson's sort of a permanent nominee for Con of the Week.
I definitely agree. Richard Porter is the OG of the week. That might have been the best moment of the entire convention. And then my clown of the week is actually going to be Matt Gaetz and whoever does his Botox. Did anybody else notice the difference in his pictures between when he was getting in the way with McCarthy and then how he looked on stage? I don't know what happened there, but Matt Gaetz is my clown of the week.
There you go. I mean, this is the first episode we've done since Trump's fist pump, and so he's definitely got to get a nomination for OG just for having the presence of mind. Like, I'll be honest, I'll never be on stage giving a speech, let alone a presidential speech. But if I get shot at, I'm ducking under the Secret Service and I'm shuffling to the car. Like, I will not have the wherewithal to be like, this is a moment. I'm going to get up and like that. That was brilliant what he did. So he certainly deserves a OG nomination for that as well. All right, leaving it open. Any final thoughts before we go to closing thoughts and close down the episode? Looks like we got everybody's nominations for the week.
I'm going to be very political and say no comment.
There you go. Well done, Joe. Your comm staff will be very proud of you. All right, let's close it down here with closing thoughts. As always, everybody who participated gets a chance to close with whatever they want to close with for the week. Dennis, why don't you kick us off?
Well, thanks again for having me back on. And all I want to add is I think there's another shoe to drop. I think the summer of political ups and downs, I think we have a few more roller coaster rides, hills here to hit over the next couple of weeks. And buckle up. I think it's going to be even wilder.
All right. Yeah, certainly in the era of drama and intrigue, and people love their I mean, listen, it's 2024. Everybody loves their crap dramas on TV, their reality shows, and this presidential race could very well become a reality show very soon. John, final thoughts from you, bud.
I think my final thought is that by the time you guys record your podcast next week, my bold prediction is that Joe Biden will not be running for president of the United States. I think he is on his way out within at least the next 2 weeks at the most.
All right, I'll admit I'm wrong if that happens. I will do it on air next week on the podcast. I won't say that you're right because I can't ever say those words out loud in public, but I'll at least admit that I was wrong on that. Representative Sosnowski, with final thoughts from you.
On that same topic, I'll admit that I'm wrong if he ends up bowing out, but I'm not expecting it. Final thought, hey, all those candidates, political operatives, consultants, campaign people, let's do some crazy stuff in Illinois, like just get people registered to vote that are likely to be on our side, and let's get ready and geared up for early voting. So for all those people who don't vote every single time, let's get them out. Let's win these swing districts.
Yeah, votes start getting cast in 2 months, maybe even less here in the state. So it's real. It's time to hustle. Michael, final thought from you, buddy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we kind of saw a glimpse of it at the convention, that there's a lot of people out there that are interested and willing to vote for Republicans that have not done so in the past. And we need to take advantage of that. So whenever you're out talking to people, knocking on doors, going to events, you're at the grocery store, the gas pump, wherever you're at, look for those opportunities, because we need to pull some of these union folks in, African Americans, Hispanics. I mean, the opportunities are endless. So let's take advantage of it.
All right, Chris, on the last few episodes you've been a little tame. Was excited to see you bring the heat. So you get the final word this week for finally coming alive on one of these episodes. I mean, of course, losing yet again to me in the debate portion, but you came alive. You brought the heat. You get the final word.
If it wasn't a panel of one who judged who won or lost, I'd probably win every debate. In any case, my friends, always remember that rhinos take many forms. Rhinos may be the Pat Brady's of the world who advocate for 0 taxes and 100 abortions. And then you have the rhinos who grift off of the Make America Great Again name, like Representative Blaine Wilhauer, who use it to the detriment of working families across this state and this country. Let us remember, friends, that some of the best Republicans who want to make America great again are actually Democrats like yours truly. We need to kick all rhinos out of not just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party, because rhinos exist. I'm going off on a tangent here. But listen, rhinos, they take many forms and they have many different colors. So we must watch for them wherever they go, be it the Pat Brady's of the world or the Blaine Wilhauers, to make America great again. Thank you very much.
Chris did his best to make me regret giving him the final word. All right. Thank you to all of our participants this week. Our guests, thank you. To our producer, Lane Davis, thanks for all the hard work you put on behind the scenes. To our viewers, make sure you like, you subscribe, you share. We've got a big election coming up, and clearly the stakes continue to get higher every week. So go out there, knock on doors, donate to your favorite candidate. Knocking on doors is one thing, but even if it's only $20, donate to your favorite candidates. It's real. This election is right here upon us. It's time to give it everything you've got. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, and we will catch you next week in the smoke-filled room.